We have with us today Monty Hall, who had the longest running game show in history, Let's Make a Deal. Even today, after 45 years, it's still ever popular. Will you please put your hands together for a handsome, wonderful gentleman, Monty Hall. Come on out. Hi, love. We get hugs here. Have a seat, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Have a seat. I like what came out from behind the door, don't you think so?
It's incidentally right.
That's a good thing. Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure. I like getting up at 6 in the morning.
You probably get up early anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good thing. I do too. Hey, how did someone like yourself, not Hall, but it was Halpern, in Canada, who was a major in zoology, pre-med, get into the game shows?
Well, actually, my mother was an actress, and I used to appear in her productions. As a little boy, when I was 6 or 7 years old, I had no speaking lines.
Yeah.
I was the kid who sat at the end of the couch. But I was, infused with the business of show business. In high school, I started acting in plays. When I went to college, I started all the musical comedies and so on.
Great.
And I was recruited out of the musical comedies in college to do radio drama. And I started working at a radio station and the networks. And then I took a job full-time. And I went to college during the daytime, and I worked at the radio station at night.
Wow.
To put myself through college. And after I graduated, I got my Bachelor of Science degree, and waiting to get into medical school, I decided, you know what? I'm now working nights and making more money than my father in a little meat market. I'm going to stay in this business. And that's what I did.
And so you did. And so how did you get involved specifically in game shows, though?
Well, when you're working at a radio station and in a market where you did everything, I had a program where I sang, and I had a cowboy program where I emceed, and I did a quiz show, and I did sportscasting. You do everything. And then finally, when I went to Toronto for the big time in Canada, I finally decided where I would fit in best, and I did a little bit of everything. When I went to New York and tried to get into sportscasting, I couldn't get the major sports. I got the soccer and hockey and boxing and wrestling, but I could also do game shows and talk shows, and it worked itself out that the game shows were where I fitted best and where I finally could make it. And so I stuck with the game shows.
And how did you come up with Let's Make a Deal?
Well, Let's Make a Deal came about when I was doing a show on NBC called Your First Impression, and my producer was Steve Hados, who had been doing a lot of shows in Hollywood, and we used to sit and have lunch together and come up with ideas. And he said he liked an idea where you had to pick the right curtain, the lady and the tiger, and I said I like to go in the audience and ask people for things and so on. And we melded the show together, and I remember we were sitting in a delicatessen across from NBC, and we were looking for a title for the show. And as we walked across Vine Street in Hollywood, a very major intersection, he stopped in the middle of the road. He stopped and he said to me, "How about Let's Make a Deal?" I said, "Terrific," and we almost got killed by a bus.
You must have made a deal with our maker, because he said, you got to continue and do this.
That's how it started, and we did the show for 27 years, and 4,700 episodes.
How did you keep it fresh?
Because every time you go out, that's a new audience. It may be your 4,000th show, but it's there first.
Right.
So you can't just say, I'm going to just walk through it. You've got to give them everything you got. It's your show. You're a performer. You give them everything you got. And that's what you do.
That's what you do when you're a performer. That's right. But all the different elements that went into that show, from behind the curtains, never knowing if there was going to be a goat or Carol Merrill was going to be there showing a beautiful refrigerator.
Right.
How did that work?
You see, the difference between Let's Make a Deal and the shows of today is that we had fun. It was a fun show. Today, all the shows concentrate on money. It's the $1 million this, it's the $1 million that. But where's the fun that we had? But we had as much fun when I'd say to somebody, "I'll give you $50 for a hard-boiled egg," and they had it. Right. You know? It was the fun that we and the costumes that they wore and the fun that they had. For me, it was a happening. It was great.
And how did you select your audience?
It makes no difference. I could go right into this audience and play the game right now.
Isn't that fun?
Who wants a car?
You'll get everyone to raise their hand.
Well, my car is outside. You can have it.
Now, what is the most unusual thing you found in someone's purse or bag?
Well, I can't tell you. I've been asked this question before. I can't tell you because there were so many unusual things. But I'll tell you one thing. A lady came to the show once, and she had, and I didn't know this until the show was over, but somebody said to me, "Did you see what that lady in the audience had?" In front of her was the mock-up of a stage with the 3 doors. And she pressed button number 1, and a little Monty Hall came out of the door and went back in. Number 2, a little Jay Stewart came out. There were 3 little Carol came out. And I didn't see it during the show I said, after this, I said, where'd you get it? She said, my husband's an electrical engineer, and he made this for me.
How incredible.
Went to all that trouble, I never even selected her.
Oh.
But that was the most unusual thing anybody... Of course, there were some people came from a club with an airplane propeller, and it's across their laps for the entire studio. And the costumes were great, but we didn't pick them. We didn't pick them for the costume. It just... We started off with business suits and dresses. A woman came with a sign that said, pick me, or let's make a deal.
Right.
I picked her, and then next week everybody had a sign. Then came the costumes, then came the Phyllis Diller lookalikes, and Frankenstein and Dracula. And NBC called us and said, what are you doing? There are several hundred people out there dressed like Halloween. What are you going to do about it? I said, nothing. This is television. This is very
fun.
Colorful.
Right.
And that we stayed with it.
And people loved it. They just absolutely loved it. And the term zonk came from your show.
Zonk.
And what is a zonk?
A zonk is when you make the wrong choice and you get the whatever it is, you get the donkeys, you know.
You get the donkeys, or you get Jay on the rocking chair as the grandma.
Jay Stewart,
he was
who was the greatest announcer ever, and the greatest assistant anybody could have. He would come into the studio every day and he'd look at the script and he'd say, is there any zonk there? Is there anything that I can dress like an old lady? Is there I can dress like a baby? He used to love playing all those parts. And we put him in a high chair, you know. And Jay Stewart was no little kid. We put him in a high chair. We dressed him up as an old granny at the spinning wheel. And if there wasn't anything for him to do that day, he sulked.
Oh, for goodness sake.
He liked playing those parts. And Carol Merrill was a terrific model.
Oh, what a doll.
She was with me for 27 years. And she lives in Australia now.
Really?
Great gal, great model.
Fantastic. We're going to talk more about Let's Make a Deal. We're going to talk about what you're doing now as well, and your family. When we come back, stay tuned. I know you will.